How are you feeling about the possibility of some type of negotiated deal with Iran now?
I am afraid that it's very unlikely. And I say that because of the demands that Trump and the Israelis are making, that demands that Iran can never accept. And I'm afraid that they know that, they're going to push these demands. I'm thinking in particular, like, you have to completely just basically dismantle your program. The JCPOA was very, very strict. But Netanyahu is saying is that we got to do what we did in Libya, and that is essentially, just blow it all up. And the Iranians are just not going to accept that. Again, they see themselves correctly, as a great civilization. They're a proud people, and they're not simply going to bow down to a bully. And one of their demands is that, okay, you have to surrender all your missile program. They're not going to do that because they realize that that's basically the deterrence that they have. The one reason probably they haven't been attacked so far and may not be attacked again is that they have this deterrence. The military planners in both Tel Aviv and in the Pentagon, you look at this and say, man, if we attack, they can take out these bases, they could sink that ship because they have these missiles. And so they said, yeah, let's think about this. Maybe not now, maybe later. This is what's happened in the past, and it may happen again. And and that's really owing to Iran's missile program. So they're not going to give that up. They would be crazy to give that up. There's just no way. And that's what they're demanding. Well, maybe this is all bluster, but then what in fact is Trump going after? He tore up the JCPOA, which was a very strict agreement. So is he going to just say, hey, maybe we could go back to the JCPOA? Again, how are you going to explain that? Well, you tore it up, you made all these threats, and now what you've done is you just basically you've admitted that you were wrong to tear that up, and you're going back to Obama's agreement. It's hard to see that happening. And then there's just a complete lack of trust. I mean, like, why should the Iranians trust anything that the Americans offer them? There would, and we know that. We've gone into the history of it, and the JCPOA is a prime example of that, of course. Why should they believe us? So it seems that there's just there's very, very far apart right now, and there's this huge, maybe most importantly, is this absence of trust. And it's very, very difficult to reestablish that trust. And I just don't think that the Trump administration is capable of doing that. It takes, you have to have a long-term view. If you realize, okay, because of our past behavior, the other side doesn't trust us. So we have to, over time, start to build up trust again. You start with small things, where the other side is not taking a big risk and, in trusting you. And then you just build it from there. And it's going to take years to do that. And I don't see any of that kind of patience or long-term thinking on the part of this administration. I just don't see it there. I mean, again, it's just quite the opposite. It's just always quick solutions. They're always talking about, we got a ceasefire around the corner, or, the idea is you wield the stick and they come in and then they make the agreement and it's all going to be done. There's just no way that's going to happen. The only way you're going to get to an agreement again is through, very patient and meticulous, well-planned negotiations. And these people don't have, just don't seem to, they don't have any of that, of those abilities. It just seems to me that, we're dealing with a very amateurish team. Some of them, like Witkoff, he's probably a very smart guy. I think he is. And, he could be a very capable negotiator, but he has very little experience. He has very little understanding of these places. And so I just don't see it going anywhere.
So it just seems so poorly thought out, though, if we actually try to bomb Iran. I don't know if they think that one bombing campaign is just going to cause Iran to cave. I don't know what they're thinking. What's going to happen is that they'll bomb Iran. Iran has said that they are ready for this and that they will retaliate. And if they retaliate, they have lots of targets, a target-rich environment for them with our bases scattered out the Middle East, and they can strike Israel. And when they do this, And I think there's a lot of people in Iran and a lot of people around the world actually that want Iran to do this. And if when that happens, does the U.S. think that the world is going to be like, oh, poor Israel and poor America, we're going to rally around you? No, they're going to be like, you bombed them. They told you over and over again. You tore up every agreement with them. Like, what are you doing? You are clearly the one that's instigating this. You've been aggravating it. We can go back. You can go back as far as you want and just see all of the provocations that have been done. I mean, just less than a year ago, Israel bombed Iran's consulate in Syria. I mean, so this is I just don't understand. Like, are they thinking that they will be able to rally support around the flag if Iran retaliates, despite everybody gearing up and saying, "Oh, is the U.S. going to attack? U.S. is going to attack." They do it. Iran punches back, and then we're like, "Oh no! What?
Yeah.
What's the?"
Well, I think you're right. Again, for most of the world, will see it for what it is. The aggressor clearly will be the U.S. and the anger against the U.S. will only increase, especially if there are severe economic consequences, which likely will take place. Again, they could block the Strait of Hormuz. They can take out these refineries very easily. Many of those refineries are very, very in easy missile range, even though they're short-range missiles. So there will be this great anger. There could be huge economic consequences for the world, but you'll see the U.S. and Israel as being at fault. Clearly they initiated this conflict. I mean, that's the way the world see it. In the U.S., again, I am less confident because, Iran has been demonized for such a long time, and we have this very powerful anti-Iran Zionist faction that, people won't respond rationally. And there may be this, again, the knee-jerk reaction may be just to double down and to bomb them more. I'm afraid that's what we'll see. I mean, it's a real danger. I certainly hope this does not happen. I think there's a chance it will be avoided. Again, with Trump, there's really, I think all bets are off. You just don't know what he's going to do. He makes threats, and sometimes he makes good on them. Other times he doesn't. We'll have to see. But
right. Well, I mean, you said that Trump only has a 43% approval rating right now.
Right.
I mean, if he does this, he doesn't have the base, I think, to make it happen. He was here within the United States. I really hope not. I hope there's not going to be a big rallying around the flag effect here in the United States. Just because, like you said, it's so obvious that we were the aggressor. We instigated this. There should be a lot of anger directed at Trump. Like, why did you do this? Why did you get our boys killed? We didn't want this. You campaigned on a platform of peace, anti-war, and then within a couple of months, it became clear that you became an Israel first guy, that your policy was whatever Netanyahu wants me to do. You brokered the ceasefire, your own ceasefire, and then you allowed him to break it, and then you started just being led along this path to war with Iran, and clearly be avoided. I just don't see how. I hope I'm wrong. I don't see Americans coming around and just being like, okay, we want to do this. Do you think so? Do you think I'm right on that, or just?
I think in the short run, you might see a rally around the flag. I remember it was the first Gulf War under Bush Sr. Like in the immediate aftermath of that war, he had something like a 90% approval rating, and it was true actually of Bush Jr. after he launched the Iraq War. I mean, it was quite extraordinary, but in both cases, as time went on, that kind of immediate rally around the flag kind of effect diminished, and it diminished, very rapidly in the case of Bush Jr. when we started to see that this was not the war that we imagined. There were no weapons of mass destruction. We're bogged down there. Our soldiers are being killed. This is becoming increasingly costly. I think that's you could see the same thing, but actually even more extreme in the case of Iran, because the consequences are going to be that much greater. You could start to see a real economic crisis, and possible humiliation too of the U.S. if Iran really takes out entire U.S. bases or sinks a ship or whatever. Again, the immediate reaction may be that, okay, yeah, we stand by our leader or whatever, but that kind of emotional reaction just doesn't last. If you actually launched an unjust or a poorly thought out war, the people see through it. I mean, that's been the case in past wars. Maybe they don't see it immediately. Maybe not those first few months or something, but as time goes on, they start to see this is just not making sense, and this was a disaster. Let's get this guy out of here.
Right. I mean, you'd think that Americans would be suffering from war fatigue. We've had so many wars in the Middle East, and we should be catching wise that these are not in our national interest, not in our best interest at all.
Yeah.
It's the opposite. Trillions of dollars wasted, millions of people dead. Democracy didn't flood through Afghanistan and Libya and Iraq like we were told it would.
Right.
There was nothing. We just spent a lot of money, killed a bunch of people, became hated in the world. Afghanistan for 20 years to remove the Taliban, only for the Taliban to come in just a week after we left and take all of our military equipment. I mean, I just don't understand how we keep on falling for this. Mm-hmm. We keep on falling for this in a large part because of the influence of the Israel lobby, though. We know now, but the thing is that is becoming more and more apparent. Like we said in the last episode, that the approval, more Americans now have a negative view of Israel. The majority of Americans, which is incredible, and I think that is going to. It's at 53%. I would expect it to go up to. Even if the war in Iran doesn't happen right away, I think within a month or so we could see that at 60%. As we continue to see this footage coming out of Gaza, but more importantly, it's breaking through the mainstream. People that I listen to, like comedians like Shane Gillis, are talking about, making jokes like, well, Israel's committing a genocide, and Joe Rogan just had Dave Smith on debating Douglas Murray. I listened to it last night before going to bed. Mm-hmm. It was phenomenal. Dave Smith just eviscerated Douglas Murray, and I think people. I'm sure a lot of people that watch our channel probably don't listen to these people like Joe Rogan, but this guy is incredibly influential. I mean, he is the largest mouthpiece in the world for the English language. And I think people hearing this about what Israel has done to the United States and drawing us into these wars and how we've been lied to again and again, and that we are becoming complicit in, even if you don't want to use the term genocide, just to say, like, if you wanted to say that, make the argument that it's all Hamas's fault. So you're saying that it's okay to kill all of these civilians. That's your position. That we are making that it's a cost that we're willing to pay. It's acceptable. Once people start to think that, or are forced to think about it and hear about it, I just think that support for Israel is going to just drop to the bottom. It already is. I think a lot of people are getting an icky feeling about supporting what's happening in the Middle East.
Yeah, no, I don't disagree with you. There's no question about it. Maybe I just want to make one minor correction. Like in the case of Afghanistan, there wasn't really any Israeli or Zionist support for that in particular. That's not the Middle East. That's Central Asia. And so that was just entirely on, our establishment, but yeah, like certainly in the case of Palestine and Yemen and Iran, the influence of the Israel lobby is huge. There's no question about it.
Mm-hmm. And I mean Libya and Iraq as well, right? That was heavily.
Libya again, not so much. I don't think that that's North Africa, but Iraq, definitely.
Well, I just remember because I was listening to that podcast and it was talking about that. The 7 countries in 10 years, right? And I think Libya was on the list, and this was, put forward by, I guess, an Israeli paper written by the Israelis.
Well, maybe it was. I just remember at the time, the just reading discussions or analyses to say that the Israelis are actually not pushing for this. They don't really care about it. But of course, Gaddafi had already kind of been neutralized. And this is something, again, Iran looked at, right? Is that he agreed to give up his nuclear program. And then a few years later, he was brutally murdered, and his government was overthrown. So I think after he gave up the nuclear program, the Israelis really lost interest in Libya. But that's kind of a tangential point, not particularly important.
Yeah, it's all falling apart here. And I think it has to. I'm glad, but it's also a little scary. Like, how is this going to happen?
Yes, there is going to be really severe reactions. The people that have been used to being in power, they're not going to give up that power gracefully. That's the scary thing. And those people that are just very emotionally committed to Israel and to Zionism, they're not going to abandon those commitments easily. And in many cases, you'll just see them double down. I think as you see within Israel, it's just like, again, it's very hard to admit that you've gone down the wrong path. And so what you do is you just shut your ears and double down. You increase the violence rather than the opposite.